Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Indie Reads Aloud. I am your host, Diana Catherine Penn, and today the amazing and astounding and lovely Barbara Evers is returning to read to us again. Hi, Barbara.
Hi. I don't know how to take that. Amazing and astounding. Cool.
Amazing and astounding because you do some great things with words, and that always amazes and astounds me.
Thank you.
I'm so happy that we got to meet in South Carolina
Me
recently.
too.
So often I don't get to meet the authors that I have on the program, so it's really special when I get to do that. And I got your
Yes.
autograph in my book as well, which is equally special.
Yeah, it might be worth something someday.
It will be. Well, it's worth something to me right now, so you're
Right.
ahead of the game
There you
already.
go. And I thank you for that. I thank you for that.
I'm very pleased to have it on my shelf, and eventually all of your books will find their way to my shelf. But
Sounds good.
I need to make space.
Don't we all?
Oh my gosh. The never-ending bookshelves. That's what I need, the never-ending bookshelf.
That would work. Yeah.
I gotta find some magic to create that.
Well, surely as a fantasy author, I should be able to help you. You would think.
Okay, I'm thinking this is a project we need to work on.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. Today you are coming back to read the second in your Watchers of Moniah series, and this
Right.
is
It's
called
going to be
the
this one
purple
right
one.
here.
The
Oh, yeah.
Watchers in Exile. And this is a
Mhm.
fantasy series where dragons, see, not dragons.
Not dragons.
I'm editing a project that has dragons right now.
No
Um,
problem.
so this series features giraffes prominently.
Yes.
And I just love that because I think giraffes are just the coolest thing. And your headshot has a giraffe. I find them remarkable because their heads are much more enormous than we ever imagined they would be as children.
Yes, and they're not light by any means. They're quite heavy. So you'll see I'm kind of pulled back. If you look back at that picture, they direct you on how to not get hit by the giraffe's head.
Yeah,
And
because that's
so you're,
concussion.
yeah, yeah, you will. I mean, it's something like 80 pounds to get hit by one of their heads.
Yeah.
It's not something you want to
I
have
got to meet
happen.
one. I got to meet one up close a few years ago. His name was Rafiki, and it was just such a magical moment to be
That's
able
a
to
good
do
name,
that.
Rafiki. I like that.
I know. I thought it was cool.
Mhm.
So, speaking of giraffes, you told me a story not long ago about Halloween and
Yes.
people who honored you and your books in such a way that I find remarkable. Could you share that story with our listeners?
Absolutely. It was the most excitement I'd had in ever since the books came out because I I like to open the door to the trick-or-treaters. I always get a kick out of interacting with the kids and seeing what they're wearing. And this I opened the door and this young boy says, "Did you write The Watchers of Mania?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did."
Yeah.
He
And how
goes,
did you know that?
and he says, "My sister's dressed as a watcher." And I'm like, "Well, where is she?" And he's like, "Oh, she's coming." I was like, "Okay." Now, his parents weren't happy that he forewarned me, but I was glad he did because I ran upstairs and got swag for the child. If you're
Nice.
going to dress like a watcher, you get swag from the author. Let's just face
Absolutely.
it. So
100%.
I was ready when they showed up, and she was dressed like a watcher. She had a bow, she had the tunic, the leggings, the boots, the braid. She had it all. And her mother had on one of those giraffe onesie pajama things. So she
Oh,
was her giraffe.
fun.
And I was just so excited. And I think I kept him on my porch for like 15 minutes talking to him. I said, I probably should let you continue trick or treating. But the girl had read all of the books
Wow.
and she's 12.
That's
And I was just like
fantastic.
blown away. And then I took pictures and I said, now, can I post these on social media? I mean, it's a 12-year-old kid. And
Right,
they said,
right.
absolutely. And thank you for asking. And I said, well, I just want to be very careful. And they said, we knew about your books because we met you years ago. And I had met this same child when she was 4, and she was dressed like
Wow.
a giraffe fairy.
Oh, that's fun.
And I had loved it. And I asked them then, can I take a picture? And they said yes. And I told them, I'm writing a series of books that have telepathic giraffes in them. So I don't know how they discovered the books had come out, but she had read them.
This
And
is this is the embodiment of positive stalking, right? People
yeah,
watching your career and staying on top of what you're writing, and then they
yeah,
find
it
you
was
this way.
incredible. And she lives right here in the neighborhood.
That's
And so that
fantastic.
was really cool. I hadn't remembered, I remembered the child, and I went back and found the picture I took of the little girl. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I kind of see that's her. She's really tall, which really works because watchers are tall.
Uh-huh.
And she had the braid, which I commented on. And her mother said, oh, yes, she told me she had to have the braid, that was significant. I was like, wow. So
That's so cool.
I was walking on air. It was
I mean
incredible.
I think that's almost better than a pushcart prize.
Oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
better than any prize.
Yeah.
And to have this child be so caught up in my stories, and also to have the parent say to me, her father said, I've read half of the first book because I wanted to make sure she could read it. And I said, I understand that and I appreciate it because I've tried to make my books accessible.
Right. Right.
And
But how
although they weren't,
cool that she read all of them. That's
she read
so
all of them.
exciting.
I've been floored. I have some avid readers that read them that young. Um, Usually, if they read them at that age, they are avid readers because they're not short books.
Right.
And they just gobble them up. And it really is kind of when we were at that event in Greer back in, was
Hmm.
it October? I don't even remember when it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
But
October.
that was one of the things that I was able to tell parents several times is yes, this book is accessible. Yes,
Yeah.
if your child is this old and an avid reader, they probably will enjoy it. And to see these young teens get excited about my books is really cool. Of course, it's really
That's great.
cool to see anybody get excited about my books because my first
100%.
fan letter came from a Vietnam veteran. So, yeah.
Yeah, so your audience really does broaden the spectrum
Yeah.
of
The
reading. That's
books crossed
fantastic.
over really well to YA. So a lot of people see them as YA just because Adana, the main character, is a teenager in the story. So a lot of people claim that automatically makes it YA. The voice isn't really YA, but that's okay. If they can read it,
And you know what?
wonderful.
As an adult reader, I love YA. It's
So do I.
very enjoyable to read them. I love the stories and I love, as you say, the accessibility of it. I don't have to worry about being shocked on page 27, right?
Right.
Like I can just read it and fall into story and enjoy it. So I
Exactly.
love YA novels for that reason. So this book is The Watchers in Exile. It's book 2 of the series. Before you read, can you set up where we are in the story, please?
Okay. So in The Watchers of Moniah, we meet Adana, who is the rising queen for Moniah, and she has been sent for her safety to the kingdom of Elwar. And in that series, we meet people from royalty, leaders, whatever you want to call them, from the kingdom of Elwar, from Belwyn and Teletia, and of course, Moniah. And they're all trying to gather together to fight off this traitor who everybody thought was dead. And so he's returned. His name is Maligon. And what I'm going to read from you today is actually a story about someone from Teletia who is I don't, if you've not read the first book, cover your ears for a moment. If you've not come into the second book, you find this out early in the second book. But this young man is actually the Prince of Teletia. We don't
Okay.
know it when we meet him. Because they've disguised who he is for his protection. And then
Okay.
we're also going, I think I'll have time to read two scenes to you, and it's the Princess Lyra of Elwar, who, when you meet her in The Watchers of Moniah, if you're familiar with Nellie Olson in the Little House on the Prairie book, she's kind of a Nellie Olson kind of character.
Okay.
But the cool thing is she has this incredible story arc throughout the series, and she's on her redemption path, but there's still a little bit of Nellie Olson in her. So
Great.
she's a fun character, right? The first one we're going to see Gerald, who's the prince, but we're also going to meet probably my favorite secondary character, and that's Brother Honest, So I'm going to read the scene with Brother Honest, and then if I have time, I'm going to read a scene with Princess Lyra.
Excellent. I am really excited. I love hearing pieces of series because then I can justify going out and buying the entire collection.
Absolutely.
So when you are ready, Barbara Evers,
Okay.
please take the microphone aloud and read from The Watchers in Exile.
Okay, I'm going to start with the scene with, we're calling him Sir Gerald here, but he is imprisoned by Maligon the traitor. Okay, so that's where we are right now. Sir Gerald of Belwyn paced his cell in the barracks. 3 steps to the wall, 3 steps back. The guard outside the door watched him, doing little to hide his yawn of boredom. What had happened to Maligon? Ever since the traitor had usurped the throne and imprisoned the empress, soldiers had kept Gerald locked in this cell except to parade him out for the populace to see. Soldiers surrounded him as he walked along the parapets of Belwyn's castle behind Maligon. After the first time, he kept his eyes averted from the macabre spectacle of heads spiked along the wall. Rebels, according to Maligon. He knew if anyone suspected his true birthright, his head would join them. Images of his mother's bedraggled appearance during the one visit Maligon had allowed him in the dungeon kept Gerald quiet. They'd stripped her of her fine gown and left her in her underclothes. Her hair, usually a glorious tumble of dark curls, hung in a tangled mass. Dirt smudged her face, but her eyes glittered with clarity. Did she maintain that clarity still, 6 days later? He remembered his reaction at the shocking sight. Blazes, Maligon, have you no honor? Keeping her caged like a rat in this filth. Gerald had reached through the bars to comfort her. My lady, what do you require? Even as he had asked the question, Gerald recognized how ludicrous it sounded. He hadn't spoken to her of his own treatment of where her quarters made his look magnificent. Empress Gabriella had ignored Gerald's question and glared at Maligon. Pleased with your coup? Do you really believe you can rule? You, the illegitimate spawn of my cousin's rape? She had spat at him then, the glob of spittle landing on Maligon's forehead. A smile twitched on Gerald's lips at the memory. He never had suspected his elegant, ladylike mother's talents included hurling spit at someone. After exchanging a few more insolent comments with the Empress, Maligon had allowed Gerald a moment alone with her. Her first words haunted him each night when he closed his eyes. He has watchers imprisoned here. The guards say a watcher set the trap for them. The traitor's ability to infiltrate the military of the 4 kingdoms included the esteemed soldiers of their ally, Moniah. At her words, he tried not to stagger or react, wondering who would turn on a watcher. Then she told him the worst of it. Maligon had a secret daughter in the ranks of the watchers. Gerald had shivered while recognizing the irony. His mother's efforts to hide her own son might be mirrored by Maligon. Before he had had enough time to gather more information, the guard had told him he must leave. He had held tight to his mother's hand, and she had given him an order the guard wouldn't understand. You must go. She had released her hold on him, but held his gaze. The words and the action echoed a lesson taught him at an early age when they lived in fear of discovery. She had never needed to use it before that day. Gerald dropped down on the cot of his cell and rubbed his forehead while staring at the soot smudges on the ceiling. How to leave? His mother expected him to get out of Belwyn. She wanted safety for him, but he wanted to save her too. There had to be something he could do. He sat back up, his hands on his knees, and looked through the barred door at the morning sunlight streaming across the grounds. Where had Maligon gone? 3 days had passed since the traitor had yanked him from the cell to follow him as he strutted back and forth in front of the people. That night, Gerald heard the shouts of men and the sounds of many horses, soldiers, and wagons departing. Did Teletia still stand? Elwar? Moniah? Where was the fool man? The guard who stood outside his door today was a new one. Maybe he could persuade him to answer a few questions. Gerald rose from the cot and wandered over to the door and leaned against the frame. He nodded at the guard, who glanced at him. Hello. The guard grunted. What happened to Morit? The previous soldier hadn't shared his name, but Gerald had overheard the soldier's joke and call him that. No response. Morit, you know him. He was my guard until today. The man shrugged. Gerald shifted to the other side of the door so he could see the soldier better. Surely you know where he is. I wanted to ask about his son, the one with the bad leg. All false, but Gerald hoped this man didn't know for it. The guard turned. A bad leg? I wouldn't know. Could you ask him for me? We talked about it all night a few days ago. He truly worried about his son's ability to work when he comes of age. Afraid I can't do that. The soldier turned away. Slumping against the doorway, Gerald feigned disappointment. That's too bad. After sitting in here so long, I recalled a remedy that might help him. The guard turned and came closer to the bars, looking at Gerald. Look, I can't say where he is. The army left 3 days ago. If he's still alive, maybe you'll see him again. Still alive? So they went into battle. Gerald's heart pounded at the news. Where? The guard backed away from the door and repositioned himself as sentry. He said no more. The morning trickled by, slow and monotonous. Gerald lay back down on his cot and drifted to sleep in the warmth of the tight space. He woke to the jangle of keys. You have a visitor. The door opened and a teacher of the faith peered in at him, his green robes brushing the ground. The man, his face hidden under a hood, turned and thanked the jailer. I'll see if I can bring him to see the truth of things. Maligon wants him as a willing figure of the faith. The guard rubbed a hand over his chin, his beady eyes looking over Gerald. I don't know why. He's just a soldier. Yes, the teacher's deep voice rumbled, but he's not just any soldier. This man was the Empress's favored knight. His presence with the army will quell many doubters. The guard took a step into the cell and peered at Gerald. In a heartbeat, the teacher grabbed him by the back of the neck and slammed his face into the wall. The soldier's body slumped to the ground. Hurry, we haven't much time. The teacher dragged the guard's body fully into the cell and struggled to yank off the shirt of the man. Gerald stared, unable to process the events. Put this on. The teacher thrust the shirt at him. Sitting back on his heels, the teacher slid his hood back. He had a bushy brown beard and friendly dark eyes. Would you prefer to remain here? He shoved the shirt at Gerald again. Or will you help me get this man into your clothes? We have scarce time to make the switch and get you out of here. Gerald jumped into action, yanking his shirt off and dragging on the soldier's sweat-soaked one. He hopped on one foot and pulled one pants leg off, then switched and pulled off the other. The teacher, meanwhile, yanked the pants off the guard. Here! Within moments, the two had stuffed the guard into Gerald's clothes and laid him on the cot. How did you find me? Gerald asked. The bearded man turned to him and met his gaze. Father Taunch sent me a message requesting me to try. We can discuss more later. We must go. He hurried out the door, Gerald quick on his heels, thankful for word from the keeper of the faith. Could they actually escape? They turned away and peered in at the soldier as 3 men walked toward them. That should keep the idiot quiet, Gerald said, taking the keys from the teacher and locking the door. He held his breath, waiting for the men to pass by. It's a shame I couldn't persuade him differently, the teacher said. Thank you for getting me safely out of there. One of the men stopped and glanced into the cell. Is everything all right? Gerald hesitated while the teacher turned a magnificent smile toward the soldier. Of course, I tried for orders to convince this young man to join our fight, but he tried to attack me. He slapped a hand on Gerald's shoulder. This fine shoulder took care of him. The man peered into the cell again. Can't see why we haven't put his head on a spike, too. A slight kick from under the teacher's robes hit Gerald's ankle. He spun toward the soldier, thinking fast, maybe you should report this to the commander, give this traitor what's coming to him. A good idea, the man nodded. Carry on. The trio turned and continued on their way. Once they turned the corner, the teacher grabbed the keys from Gerald. Quick thinking, but the keys shall go with us. Let's give this man a chance at life. And so a little bit further in that section, we discovered this guy's name is Brother Honest, that teacher. Okay, I'm going to skip over. I don't know how much time I'm going to have for this, but this is Princess Lyra. Her mother, Queen Quilla, has taken over the throne in Elwar. She's not has no right to it, but she's taken it over, and she's imprisoned Lyra in her room. Clothes lay flung across the bed, the floor, anywhere they landed, while Lyra dug through a chest and wardrobe closet. What had happened to the ring? She crawled around the floor, peering under the large pieces of furniture, but the ring and its box weren't there. She should have noticed where she threw it. Had Hannah found it on the floor and tucked it away in a drawer or chest, or had the maid stolen it? In the middle of the night, she decided to escape. She might not be granted access to the castle, but from her window yesterday, she'd noticed an increase in soldiers and nobles. Laughter and celebration rang in their voices. They moved with energized steps. Something had happened. Something bad for Kiffen. She needed to find a way out and get to Soraya. She gave the protector of the faith the ring. She could take it to Kiffen. In the midst of her digging, Lyra discovered the Green Watcher's uniform Adana had made for her was missing. She chewed her lip, trying to figure out where her mother might hide it. Her plan depended on the ring for Kiffen and the uniform to help her leave. Without the camouflage, her plan to escape out the window to the narrow ledge would never work. Not in a dress, anyway. Lyra sighed and gave up the search for a moment. She stood at the window, pushing damp curls away from her forehead. The plan had felt perfect in the long hours of the night, but in daylight, the distance from the ledge to the first secure footing was farther than she realized. Did she dare risk it without the leggings and tunic? She dropped into a chair. When Queen Quilla entered the chamber sometime later, Lyra didn't care how her mother might interpret the disarray of clothing. She just lifted her gaze to her mother's frowning face and shrugged. Queen Quilla surveyed the mist for some time, then her gaze settled back on Lyra with exaggerated maternal concern. Are you well, Lyra? If I didn't know better, I'd say you'd been attacked. Just by these, Lyra said, holding up her hands. No one had access to her room, so she saw no reason to deny its condition. Queen Quilla clucked her tongue and turned back to the door where Hannah stood, her eyes round in amazement. Well, come on. We have little time if she's going to attend the celebration. Yes, Your Majesty. The maid scurried over to a pile of clothes and began gathering them in a heap on the bed. Lyra watched, her brain churning. A celebration? Was she allowed to leave her rooms? Maybe she should escape another way. We have cause to rejoice tonight, Queen Quilla said. You will attend a formal dinner and wear a suitable gown. We don't have much time, but I found a dressmaker who is willing to make an outfit for you this afternoon. She will have to alter one of your existing dresses. We don't have time for anything else. Lyra fought the urge to flinch when her mother approached, zealous excitement on her face. Bejeweled fingers stroked a cool line across Lyra's damp cheek. A thick rush of her perfume, gardenias, soiled the air. You should clean up. The dressmaker will be here soon. I'll send a page with her. If she needs supplies, he will retrieve them. Lyra nodded. A page named Catch had delivered the message from Garigold a few days ago. The son of a minor noble, the boy had arrived in Elwar just a few days before Adana's birthday. Maybe she could convince him to help her. Once her mother swished from the room, Lyra turned on Hannah. Where is it? Where is the ring? Hannah hesitated, the old look of fear crossing her face. Lyra fought the urge to shake the maid. She settled her face into a relaxed expression and dropped her hands by her side. Hannah, the queen gave me a special ring the other day when Taryn visited. It had a golden box. She hesitated, ashamed to admit her childish behavior. I threw it across the room. The maid's face brightened with a smile. She nodded and scurried over to a chest. I thought it looked important. I hid it in the little chamber in the lid of this chest. Astounded, Lyra watched Hannah slide open a tiny door inside the chest lid. Some of you, Hannah. Do you know where my Green Watcher's uniform is? The maid shook her head. Sorry, Your Highness, I've never seen it. Never mind, Lyra said while she slipped the ring on her finger. This time she put it on the index finger. It still hung loosely, but she could hold it in place with her thumb. Staring at the ring, she wondered how it might help her escape. Lyra jumped when Catch and the dressmaker bustled into the room. She blinked in surprise at the tall, stern figure of Helmira. The dressmaker curtsied, then hurried forward, Catch at her heels. Your Highness, let's see how beautiful we can make you in one afternoon. You must be properly attired for this grand occasion. The woman glanced at Hannah while her hands fluttered around the dress Lyra wore, tucking and turning the material. Have some tea. It's going to be an exhausting day. The maid bobbed once in acknowledgement and headed for the door. Make sure it's piping hot, Helmira called after her. I can't tolerate cold tea. Brew a new pot and bring some food too, something freshly made and warm. The door closed behind Hannah. Lyra opened her mouth to speak, but Helmira held up a warning finger. She whispered. The key in the lock clicked, then Catch put his ear to the door. After a moment, he straightened and grinned in excitement. She's gone. Good. Helmira placed her hands on her narrow hips and turned to Lyra. We've got a lot of work to do if we're going to get you out of here before your maid gets back. And I'm going to stop there.
And again, we end on a cliffhanger. Thank you so much.
Yes.
That's fantastic. I love working with fantasy authors and hearing fantasy authors read from their work because I get to learn new vocabulary. One of the things I like best are place names because I find them very important for establishing the tenor of the story. So how did you make decisions on creating your place names for your world?
You know what's funny is I don't recall how I came up with Moniah, Elwar, Teletia, and Belwyn. No clue. However, they all reflect those kingdoms' cultures. Moniah has a very different sound to it, very different feel to it than Elwar.
Mm-hmm.
Elwar is a much more formal kingdom. It's got your ruler can be queen or a king as opposed to a Moniah. So sorry, I forgot to turn off my timer. Whereas Belwyn is where I said Gerald was from Teletia. Gerald's from Belwyn. I got that background. Belwyn has a very European feel to it.
Okay.
And I actually decided to make a lot of names, like the Empress in Belwyn is Gabriella. So kind of a French kind of flavor to it. Talisha, I gave a little bit more of an Asian feel, but it's not really, the name is, it's still kind of a Eurasia kind of feel to it.
Yeah.
And so we have, in other places, we meet the rulers of Talisha and the people involved, and all of them do and eventually work together. But right now, Maligon is taken over right and left. So he's already gotten Belwyn. Um, we don't know from the reading, but we know he's gotten Talisha, and we know he's going after Moniah. And people suspect he has Elwar because Kiffen is supposed to be king in Elwar right now, but he was escorting Adana back to Moniah, and they got attacked. So he's not there, and Quilla, his stepmother, took the opportunity to
So
seize the throne.
I love the vowel sounds that you matched to go with the feel of each place. It kind of does give a personality to the spaces, or at least matches the personality of the spaces. Did you do the same thing with character names as well?
What I did with character names, especially for Moniah, is I would come up with a new character, I would think about who this character was, what their personality was like. And then I found a translator online that I could take English and translate to another language. And so I would do Igbo or Swahili or Afrikaans or something along those lines. And then I would go through, I put in the English word, and I would go through and see what some of the words would be. And I would take something out of there that fit the way I wanted my names to work. Like in Mania, the men's names always end with a consonant, the women's names always end with a vowel. And so I might find a word that I wanted for this particular woman, but I needed to adapt it a little bit so that it ended with a vowel or something along those lines.
Sure.
So I did purposefully with them. Now, did I start out that way? No. I started out with very simple names, and I had early on an agent call me on it. I was pitching at a conference, and she said, and Adana's name was not Adana at the time. It was actually Adriana.
Ah.
And she called me on, she goes, "Why didn't you just call her Tiffany? I mean, but look at this, you've got giraffes. Why would," and so Adana is actually, we'd have to go back and look. It may be Swahili, but
Okay.
it means her father's daughter.
Perfect. So when we read these books, just for fun, for those of us who are so afflicted with vocabulary, you might want to look up meanings of different things to connect to the names. That's a really cool idea.
Mm-hmm.
Very
So that
cool.
was primarily there. Other people like Lyra just told me her name, and Lyra fits her personality.
Okay.
Honest told me his name too. Brother Honest, the guy who saved Gerald out of, helped
Yep.
him escape.
In that first scene, yeah.
Yeah. When he had to give his name, he told me, "My name is Honest, period."
Nice. Nice.
And that fits who he is to a T. And he's one of
It's
my favorite secondary characters.
it's always fun when the characters help you along in the writing process. I think that
Yeah.
just makes it a little bit easier when they stand up. Thank you so much for coming back on the program, Barbara. I really
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much.
And we're going to do this again because you have more books.
Yes, we are.
Thank you so much. I hope you have an awesome day.
You too.